Welcome, everyone. Glad you're able to join us today. We're going to be talking today about the next step in the progress of SABER in its commitment to being able to exchange information in the widest variety of formats. And this is the introduction of the National Information Exchange Model format for SABER exchanges. I'm Jim Morentz, Executive Director of the SABER community and XchangeCore community, XchangeCore being the software that underlies SABER, the organization. And what we're going to do today is take a look at a few different topics. First of all, sort of a level setting, quick 3-minute overview of SABER so that everybody knows what we're talking about, followed by a look at what business status is from both an operational standpoint as well as data, because that's what we're ultimately getting to. And we'll go through the in-depth, the translation of that business status into NIEM, giving a background to NIEM and providing all of the steps that we went through to create this NIEM information exchange package. Then a couple of reminders, first about the fact that if you're a SABER member, you can get the SABER mobile app to report your business status or to view other people's business status. And also a reminder about playing in National Level Exercise 2019. We'll conclude with an open mic session, and somewhere on your screen in this GoToWebinar, there's a little hand, and if you raise your hand, I'll turn you on to be able to talk. And at any time during the session, if you find that little question mark there and ask a question, we'll deal with that at the end of the session. So let's get started. Begin with the SABER overview. The reason behind SABER is disasters can be disasters for business. You see the statistics there. 40% never reopen, 29%, only 29% are operating after a couple of years. One of the key factors is speed, because if a company goes 9 days without their IT services, they end up declaring bankruptcy within a year. So SABER wants to make certain that businesses get back in business faster, because the longer the business is out of business, the greater chance of failure. What SABER does is depicted there in the graphic. Fundamentally, the idea is to have a business create their status, share it with SABER, and then distribute it to lots of other organizations, government, volunteers, even other businesses. So it's a one-to-many distribution. On the left-hand side, many of those businesses are engaged in sharing with SABER, making many one-to-many exchanges. So that's the way we move, and what the reason for SABER is to move information in that fashion. You see the names of the companies there that were part of the founding and organizing group. And finally, make sure you understand the purpose of SABER. It's to influence government recovery priorities, one hand. Second part is to enable business-to-business collaboration so that businesses know who needs what. Our whole purpose is to provide accurate, timely business status information with the ultimate goal to get businesses back in business faster. Now, FEMA has embraced a new way to think about disaster response and recovery, Lifelines. Well, SABER members are FEMA Lifelines. Here you see that SABER provides status in 3 of the lifelines through our members in food and fuel and pharmaceutical and hotels and home repair, water, clothing, hospitals, many others. So think of SABER as underpinning some of these lifelines that FEMA is now focusing on. And SABER is award-winning. 2017 FEMA Individual and Community Preparedness Award for Technology Innovation. And then last year, the International Association of Emergency Managers Partners in Preparedness Award. So we've got some credibility as we approach this task of helping businesses get back in business faster. So what does all that mean? How does this work? Real quick few pictures. 3 different ways that you can get information into SABER if you are a company. A fully automated connection can be made to SABER, and we help you do that at very little effort on your part. Secondly, the vast majority of companies use spreadsheets to manage their own understanding of business status. We take those same spreadsheets, you don't have to change a thing, and build a template for you to upload those through the saberspace.org website into SABER. And then lastly, the commercial SpotOnResponse mobile app. It's a handheld operations center and field status reporting, also provides information into SABER. On the other side, governments and other organizations take the information out of there in many different formats, that's really the whole topic of today, and put it into portals or incident management software or their GIS portals or other mobile apps or even the free copy of Google Earth. So the function of SABER, which is the organization using XchangeCore, is to move information from the left-hand side about business status to the right-hand side so people can make better decisions to support businesses and speed their recovery. Now, what does this business status thing mean? Well, it's really 2 topics. One of them is simply saying, are you open? Are you closed? Are you have some form of limited operations? But then we saw that we can do and provide more about the context. So not just the what of the status, but the why of that business closure, which allows government and other businesses to be able to help get that business back in business. So let's take a look. Today, open-close status, 2 different types, authoritative status, about 60,000 locations across the country, and the members that you see there, and the recipient side, 19 different state agencies, a dozen federal agencies, all in this flow of information. And then there's another set of information called proxy, which says, we think this one might be closed. Authoritative, the information is coming from the company saying this is our status. A proxy, in 2 different formats, are saying you might interpret this as closed. First one is satellite transceiver status. Is this satellite working? Well, there are about 50,000 locations out there and hotels and gas stations and others. And if the satellite isn't transmitting, that's a proxy for maybe being closed. Can't tell you absolutely authoritatively, but it might very well be closed. Similarly, working with Healthcare Ready, some of the SABER members provide their information through that, and we then pick that information up, with the information being that in the last 12 hours has a prescription been filled. Again, don't know whether that absolutely means that the business is closed, but we're saying, look at that, that business may not be operating at its capacity because it's not filling prescriptions. With that, well over 100,000 locations across the country that SABER currently has. So that's the what. Now, let's look at the why. The why says, business, tell me a little bit. Is your store open? Well, if it is, you're off the list. I mean, SABER almost doesn't care. There's no impact. You don't have to do anything else. Then ask the question, do you have damage to the store or your commodities? If there's enough that you can't open, then again, until that's going to be assessed in some way and determine how to fix that problem, we sit down. We're off the table. That's all a business has to answer. Next one, are employees available? Well, if they're not going to be able to get to work, you're not going to be able to open. And again, that's the point at which the business can say, okay, I don't need to tell you anymore because we are insufficient, we are not open. Next question. If you have a building and you have commodities and you have employees, are the lights on basically? If not, what's the substitute to get open? Because you got everything ready, but maybe you're missing electricity, therefore a generator would help. Next question. If we can get open, can the customers get to us? If not, why would we open? If I'm on an island surrounded by broken down flood or broken down bridges, maybe there's no reason to open. So we probe that question. Next one is, if you can get the customers there, can you actually carry out financial transactions? And if not, how do you handle just taking cash if that's going to work? And then finally, if we are selling, will we be resupplied? If not, how are we going to stay open? So those are really the questions that are going to answer the why about this business when it reports whether it's open, closed, or in some form of limited operations. Now, how do we translate that into NIEM? First of all, what is NIEM? NIEM is a common vocabulary designed for information exchange. It's called a reference model. And it's been adopted by multiple federal agencies, Department of Defense, multiple international organizations that say, okay, we have different ways of saying things in the application I'm using. Can we have a common exchange vocabulary? So in that reference model, things that are called data elements, which are the words, they're equivalent to words in a dictionary. So my data that I'm going to see up on a screen, you've got a screen and it says, extent of damage. Well, that's a set of words that are now going to be defined by NIEM with a bunch of agreed upon terms, definitions for that word, relationships, formats, all those things that help you understand language. And this is the language of data. Something I want to carry through this to the end in that it's really important that NIEM is for exchange. These words and this dictionary is completely independent of how information is stored in an individual system or application that you're using. We'll see how that works and how we do the translations in a minute, but remember that part. So, practically what's NIEM look like? Over here, that word independent storage, you'll hear that again. Got 3 different organizations on the left-hand side, each of which independently operates a system and stores its information. At the top, organization A says, hey, I've got a last name, I've got sex, and I've got a nationality here in my data. Shows up on my screen. When I enter data, I'm going to enter it next to those terms. Organization B in the middle says, oh yeah, mine's a surname, sex, and nationality. And organization C calls it family name, gender, and origin of birth. You can see how, even though it's logical, we could probably figure that out. But if the computer was sending gender from C to B, B would look at that and say, I don't know what a gender is. Well, that's what NIEM is all about. NIEM creates this data model elements, the words. And the words are agreed upon transformations so that when the organizations on the left-hand side say, I want to exchange information, I'm going to take the word last name and I'm going to say to you, hey, that's person's surname. And the guy down at the bottom says, family name is person's surname. So that when it comes out the other side, when I have made my transformation into these common elements, everybody's going to be able to look at it and say, I understand. Person's surname matches my last name. Because over on the right-hand side are going to be recipient organizations. And they have to do exactly the same translation to put it back into their system. Let's see how that works in SABER. Remember that phrase, independent of how information is stored. So we start out with this flow that you saw earlier for SABER. Business status, into SABER, out to all those other organizations. So on the left-hand side, applications are producing data. You just saw that. That's a form of independent storage, and you can call it whatever you want. There is then an application data composition into the NIEM conformant data. That means when you move that business status to SABER, you're going to change that, your words, into words that NIEM understands. But, important point, we'll talk about it at the end, SABER also understands not just NIEM, but formats in JSON, formats in GeoRSS, formats in XML, formats in CSV. If you don't know what those are, they're just different languages in a sense. And they compose different words in their own dictionary. No matter what those compositions, whether those words are made in NIEM or in some specialized JSON format or a CSV format, in the middle, SABER, as the organization, XchangeCore as the technology, orchestrates that data from the provider and composes it into a way to push the information out to specific recipients. And in a sense, it becomes an independent storage, even though it's a transactional storage, but independent storage. So again, that does not have to be NIEM. Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't be. But that allows us to then, in the next step, on the second from the right, expose that data out of XchangeCore and say, you know what? If you want it in a JSON format, you got it. We have made and orchestrated all the words and all the different dictionaries together so that when you get it in a JSON format, you're going to be able to interpret what it is, or an RSS, or now NIEM. So each one of those steps that takes place is exactly what NIEM wants every system to do. SABER, however, is doing it in multiple formats because businesses on the left-hand side, governments on the right-hand side, we need to give them the smallest lift possible for their effort to get the maximum amount of information. Therefore, those of you who have been around for a long time know that SABER imposes almost zero requirements on the business to provide information. They give us what they have, and that's why SABER succeeds. Now with NIEM, we're asking them, and the whole business context, we're asking them to voluntarily give a little bit more so that on the right-hand side, when the applications consume the data in whatever format you want, you're able to visualize it and analyze it, and a third form of independent storage, you can then have that data and do anything that you want with it. So that's the process that SABER has and how NIEM has been overlaid on top of it as an additional format that allows us to then translate those business status questions, the why, into terms that will make sense on both sides of the equation, no matter what format is moving from left to right. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by building a data model for SABER data that then will get composed into NIEM. So you can't read any of this, little tiny words, so let's explode this a little bit. The SABER status data model has a basic open, closed, limited status. Actually, let me come back over here. 2 columns, left-hand column, right-hand column, with a right-hand column linked in, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I'm doing here is exploding the left-hand column, because this is what these terms, these categories of information, no matter what they are called, have been what companies have been submitting for 4 years. And what that information has been translated into as part of SABER. So, who and what? we've got some name information there, we got a description, and we got the status, open, closed, or limited. Next set of information is where. It's basically latitude and longitude, addresses, telephone numbers, all that stuff about where that location is. And then finally, the last little bit is when and how. This is some of this on the right-hand side is more technical because it's going to be the software name that's providing and the source name and things like that, kind of icon that should be used. But in effect, that left-hand column has been happening since the beginning of SABER. Open, closed, limited status with some information wrapped around it. And again, a real key is that we do not require, SABER does not require a business to submit all this information. Again, a business gives us what they want to give us, and the technology matches it up with this data model. No obstacles for a business. That's the mantra. So that's the left-hand column, the open, closed, limited status. The right-hand column only exists when the closed or limited status, as you can see there, is set by the business, and then this set of now voluntary information, but now formalized information about the business context exists. So same things that you saw earlier. There's questions that you saw, the data elements that you saw, damage to the facility, employee availability, utilities, using a generator, financial transactions, do you have a supply of your commodities? All those things are now translated into the set of words that we're going to use for making a common exchange. These happen to be the set of words for the NIEM common exchange. So that data model was now created by mapping the words that we use in, have been using in SABER for a long time, and the NIEM words. Again, that vocabulary shift. Again, you can't see this, so let's focus on a couple of things. This mapping process, formalize the NIEM. You have to do this in order to have it make sense. Second column, if you look at that, that's the words that we've been using in SABER. What? Name, description, status, reopening date, status comments, damage to the facility. Those are the words that if I look at the data from SABER in its, let's call it the English language format, those are the words that you see as the labels for, fourth column over, the definition. What is the business? Name is the business common name. Description, subscription. Status, open, closed, limited. So those are the source element says these are the words that I want you to use, status, and what fits in those words can be open or closed or limited. That's the English side of it. That's the original SABER side of it. Now in the blue down in the bottom, this now becomes the NIEM side of it. NIEM element is what we used to call the what, or the name or the description. The NIEM type then becomes the NIEM, it's the equivalent of the NIEM element. That's the NIEM word that is used. Then finally, the NIEM definition says a kind of activity. So we have a business there that we've defined as one that is only going to be here because it's closed. That's the activity that we're going to see there, and we're going to see that activity category text representing the business. So it's that process of translating with all those terms in blue, all the NIEM things, those are fixed. You find one or you create a new extension to NIEM to match the words on the left-hand side. So let's look at it very specifically here. We got the name. It's my common business name. Down in the NIEM, I'm going to call that activity name, NC, which is part of the categorization, activity name. And what I call a common business name is a kind of now a kind of activity because we're focusing this whole thing on the process of an organization opening and closing. So that's how my application on the left-hand side moves the information into NIEM. Let's look at it a little bit more detail here because remember, these things are dictionaries. So name's easy, but what I have here in the circle now on the top are damage to facility. Okay, so what's that damage to facility mean? Well, in our source element, the SABER side, SABER data, that could mean lost stock, it could mean the structure needs some repairs, it could mean major structural damage or some other category. That gets translated into a NIEM element, which is called EM:(CAT-G damage text. And its definition then becomes an element for the description of the damage to the family facility like beaches, parks, transit, etc. So you see that matching that takes place in order to go from the SABER language, let's call it, to the NIEM language that exists. That then gets mapped into what's called a schema. And the schema basically says, okay, now we got that whole dictionary out there. We're going to have a phrase that is called business status context that consists of this set of words out of the dictionary. So it's almost like putting together a sentence. And from that mapping that we talked about just a minute ago to this schema is a very formal process of matching that schema as we just, or those words in the blue there to the NIEM words on the right-hand side, and then creating this thing called a schema, which simply means that it can be read by a computer. It has certain formats associated with it. And let's look at this exactly. And first of all, an important point is that this is the NIEM JSON schema. NIEM began with and formally and is officially an XML format. They now allow JSON, and that is what is much more commonly used in the real world, particularly the business community, for storing and exchanging information. So the SABER tool set is built around a NIEM JSON schema. XML looks the same but different. Process again. The NIEM element is the NC activity name. And in this NIEM schema format, which now has all these funny little lines and brackets and all those things that the computer will read, we see activity name. It carries along with it the definition that is called the description here of name of the activity. It's a name of activity. It has some references to other things that allow NIEM to be a referential model, and that gets created, fortunately, nice and automatically now. Kudos to the NIEM folks over the years. When I did this several years ago for the original usage XchangeCore, this was almost always a manual process. Now, beautiful process. So way to go, NIEM guys. So we've now mapped, we've created this JSON schema. But you don't move the schema around. The schema is what sits there and says, hey, if I move the right data around, what you move around is an information exchange package. And here we see, this is a JSON document on the left-hand side. This is a sentence. And it contains all these words, activity category text and activity name and activity status field, all of which mean the things that we saw in the mapping. It means the type of business. It means the name. It means the address. And when I then push that information around in this information exchange package, there we go. We have an activity name. It's closed Macy's Woodland Mall in Maryland. And all the other information associated with that sentence is included in that JSON NIEM information exchange package. Whew. That's how you get to having this NIEM exchange. We've finally now gotten to the actual data and the sentences. So let's pull this all together by looking at the other formats that are part of SABER. And we come back to this diagram that you saw earlier and remind you how NIEM overlays onto the exchange process that already exists in SABER as an additional way to gather the information up, move it through XchangeCore, and push it out the other side. Note, key point here, we have 3 independent storage points there. Not necessary. A NIEM sender can go directly to the right-hand side, a NIEM recipient, and they can communicate independently. Because of the nature of the world we live in, and all those people on the left-hand side are not NIEM compliant, they can't send it to people who only receive NIEM on the right-hand side. In the same way, the people on the right-hand side may very well accept NIEM, but also need to accept different kinds of formats. And that's where SABER comes in, and XchangeCore in its multi-format data orchestration, because it's not just NIEM. SABER isn't going only to NIEM. SABER is adding NIEM to the other formats that it exchanges, enabling us to be able to continue to broaden the range of suppliers of the data as well as the consumers' applications of the data. And that's all because of the ability of XchangeCore and the connectors that SABER uses to make transformations. And let me make it as simple as possible. Think of a spreadsheet of data, column headings. Those column headings are data elements. They can be transformed into the best practice terminology, and that's what we have been doing for a long time. So that consistency across companies is provided to the recipients of the data by doing these transformations. Consistency is done by the technology, not by enforcing policy. So we don't say just to Macy's and Costco and all the others, you have to, in your first column, have the word business name. No, I don't care what that is. As the second bullet says, somebody can upload at their column name STRID. I think that might mean store ID, something like that. SABER then transforms the column that has STRID and that word STRID into name. That's our best practice. By doing this, it allows us across all those different companies that don't want to change anything to improve analysis of this data, how you can sort it, how you can retrieve it, requiring no change whatsoever for the business process or their data usage. Absolutely critical to the survival of SABER is to not impose anything on the businesses. That name, when it's composed or transformed by SABER, becomes common across every different business that has uploaded it without changing what the business has, but it's being offered out to the consumers of that information. And it's being offered out as a GeoJSON format, a KML format, a GeoRSS format, an XML format, all of which retain the human readable word name. Now, what NIEM has said is a slightly different phrase for us, please. NIEM requires a transformation for NIEM users to activity name, just like you saw earlier, which SABER does for the NIEM conformance. So when that STRID gets transformed in SABER, it becomes name in JSON, name in KML, name in RSS, and activity name in NIEM. That's the essence of what we've been able to accomplish using XchangeCore and SABER to enable dozens of different applications on the right-hand side, the recipient side, and where are we now? Close to 50, I suppose, different companies provide 50 different formats of information on the left-hand side, and it all becomes common exchangeable information. So all the different formats that you see here, and just highlighting a couple of things, we've always done a GeoJSON, or for a while done a GeoJSON output. Now there's a new GeoJSON input, or JSON input. Major step forward there. KML, output only, do not import KML formats. GeoRSS, both ways. CSV, I've inputted that for several years and now have a new output that's on its way. XML through a SOAP connector, both input and output. New output REST queries that are with more of them coming soon. And the whole topic of this, NIEM, the newest informant with a new input and a new output. So we're seeing the rounding out, and there are very few other formats that exist out there in the world that can't be composed as part of the process that we now use inside of SABER through XchangeCore. One more time. Adding NIEM doesn't change anything. It only improves SABER with its basic principles so that businesses still provide whatever they want in whatever format they want. Spreadsheet upload or automated upload, they provide that. SABER and XchangeCore do the heavy lifting to translate and transform. We do that by building an automated interface to a business system, if that's the best way in the way that the company wants, or we build a configuration to accept spreadsheet content, which seems to be the more popular way of doing it. The additional best practice data continues to remain voluntary because SABER is a community, not an authority. So it remains voluntary, but we're starting to see companies look at that and say, that information would be useful to me. And that's where we built the best practice. That information is useful to the company. That best practice can be included with any of the spreadsheet outputs, and it's already automatically included with the new SABER mobile app. And then the last point about SABER is data. Available in many different formats, many different applications, and now a NIEM conformant JSON for those of you who want that information exchange package. So with that, let me conclude with a couple of reminders. One of them is the reminder that you're enrolled as a SABER member. You can get the SABER Partner SpotOnResponse mobile app. And just as an illustration here, left-hand side, touch My Status, the sites that you manage and have authority to change their status pop up. Click on it, decide whether you have no status, limited operations, or closed. When that happens, it automatically gets transformed into a geographic location, some text, and now there's the business status context that you see there. And reflect back. Damages, employee availability, utility problems, same things we've been seeing all along are now included in the mobile app, which provide the additional content associated with the why of that particular business closure. So remember that. Just make the request through the, there's a web page on there that on the saberspace.org. Next thing to remember, playing the national level exercise. You can do that with you through a direct connection, working with you on the spreadsheet upload. You can use the mobile app, and remember the SABER Sim Center that can help you simulate the information that matches the scenario of the central United States earthquake. So to participate through SABER, enroll at saberspace.org. Up in the upper right-hand corner, under the What's New category, there's a click, and you'll be able to enroll there. If NIEM is your thing, you can now put a check mark next to that and know that you are going to be SABER enabled through NIEM. And also remember, virtually any other format that anybody needs is available out of SABER. So have an excellent month. Thanks for your attention, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Have a good time.